with mobile. But the question is, how do we make these humanized experiences secure? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let me bring up our panelists. Come on, guys. I'll sit on this end. Actually, why don't we sit in order of pictures so people can get your names, and then you can go ahead and self-introduce, and we'll just get right at it. Okay, so let's start with you. Why don't we go down and just introduce yourself, your company, briefly, and what do you do?
Hello, everyone. I'm Gautam Hazari. I'm the CTO for Secura Mobile Intelligence. We work with mobile operators to what we call solving the identity crisis in the digital world.
Sure. And we'll talk about them in a minute.
Thank you, Michael. So my name is Nilay. I work for Mfiltrate, and as a group, we are present in almost 70 countries and across 130 operators and around 200 brands. And we work in the space of ad fraud, identity, brand safety, and many more. Thank you.
Noah?
Hi, my name is Noah Rafelko. I don't even need this microphone because my voice is a little loud. That being said, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called TSG Global. We've been into identity management for several years, but in telecom forever. And we're here to make your digital ID associated with your phone number.
Hi, so Glim Povar. I work for Telefonica Tech as Global Product Director for digital identity solutions, which we're deploying across the Telefonica footprint in Europe and Latin America.
Okay, so let's dig right in. So we're going to be talking. Oh, one more. Sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
Hi guys.
I forgot we had
thanks for the intro, Michael. Pleasure to talk to you all. I'm not in Barcelona, but I do hope that everyone's having a great time. I'm Theodore. I'm Chief of Staff at Vox Solutions, and basically what we do is provide technology for A2P monetization and anti-fraud to operators and mobile identity solutions to enterprises worldwide.
So when we talk about humanizing the mobile ecosystem and how to make this, reduce friction from the processes, but then also make it secure, let's talk about, first and foremost, why does this matter? What is a good experience? What does humanization mean? Then what do we do about addressing all of the fraud that we've been talking about pretty much throughout the rest of the day? And then finally, what's the technologies? What are the solutions for solving that? So let's start with the humanization question. And Neely, can you talk a little bit for us, like, what are we doing in helping with onboarding and these other types of solutions? Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, that's right. So I think the first and the foremost question is to why exactly are we sitting here at this point right now, and what is the relevance all about? So I think when we talk of humanization, it's all about the fact that we're not a cybersecurity organizations. We're talking about I think as Andrew also spoke about, an experience which is seamless for the user. So it's not about security or experience. It has to be a marriage of both security and experience. And from a perspective from the clients, what are we talking about? We're talking about right from the start, which is about user onboarding. I think that's the first and the foremost piece where there is an engagement of the brand with the user, and that is where identity process kicks in. It's about things like cart abandonment, something which e-commerce players suffer a lot. It's about cash on delivery orders, again, where identity needs to be invoked to be able to verify the purchases which is happening.
And let's pause right there. Noah, you were saying earlier there's a ton of fraud that's going on with cash and delivery orders, if I recall.
Yes, I mean, it really comes into when you try and identify someone through the current or the existing mechanisms, you often fail because the data isn't high fidelity data, and it's not like a high fidelity stereo. It just means that you just don't have enough points of stakeholder value to validate, meaning that you have big holes in security and allow for everything from social engineering to like massive attacks on your network. So.
And Neely, you were commenting, then that also leads to what? Inventory, some problems with inventory.
That's right. So even inventory blocking is, again, a big problem that is there. So all these billion-dollar sales which go on with Amazon, Flipkart, the world, and Walmart's and all. So there is a documented history that there are crawlers which come in and they fake users to block your inventory into the carts. Now, while you're placing orders, Is it necessary to invoke identity to ensure that it is a genuine human which is placing the order, or a bot or a script or a malware that is doing it? So all these are instances where I think the brands and the clients suffer. There is a huge leakage that's happening. You know, the whole process is getting abused, and that makes identity discussion to be very, very important.
So there's a significant amount of whys to be able to facilitate and help a business. And if we solve these problems, it both fixes both top line, bottom line, improves trust.
True.
At the end of the day. So I want to turn to Glenn and Theodore now. So what are some of the the problems that are occurring from some of these areas, and can you help quantify some of these issues?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think, well, obviously, we've talked a lot about authentication. That's SMS OTP continues to be the hot topic, and I guess Jack Dorsey not Jack Dorsey, I mean Elon Musk shone a light on that in the last couple of weeks. How do you prove that you are who you say you are in the digital world? Actually, it's a pretty hard thing to do at scale, I would say, at least for the mass market. And it's the reason why SMS OTP is so enduring, I guess, and for all the reasons Andrew mentioned in the last talk. But in terms of what the operators are doing, on a broad scale, I think, MWC this year, we've already announced this morning in the keynote from Jose Maria, who's our Telefonica chairman, but also the GSMA chairman, that we are, as 21 global operators, building out now standardized APIs, and we launched 8 of those today, this morning, during the keynote. And a lot of those actually around identity, so not all of them. And I think we are serious about addressing this as a scale opportunity now.
And let me pause right here. So when we were doing our preamble, you came up with a really interesting point that when Tim Berners-Lee, early on when he first invented the World Wide Web, we missed something pretty serious in the internet stack. And what is that?
Yeah, I mean, we just forgot to build. They forgot to build an identity layer, right?
Right.
And I guess, there's lots of people trying to solve for that now, whether it's Web3 or Web5 or whatever it is. A lot of those tools probably do exist, and they were talked about in the last session, verifiable credentials, DIDs. These are all technologies that are standardized or close to being standardized, and I would say actually we have all the tools we need today in terms of technology. Mm-hmm. Actually, the problem is getting it in people's hands. Right. The problem is changing consumer behavior.
Okay, so let me pause you. So Quantum, when we were in our prep call too, you raised something really important. You just talked something about getting something in the people's hands. And we talked about right now that 68% of the world's population has one of these in their hands. It's going to grow significantly more. And every one of these has a SIM card in it. And what's the I for SIM stand for?
Identity.
Right.
And then the important thing to realize is it's not today. From 1991, I in the SIM is about identity. We talk about eSIM still. I in the SIM is about identity. And that's important. Because that can, what I say, that has a potential to solve some of the identity crisis in the digital world, including humanization, and that's important.
Okay, and Theodore, how do we start leveraging now? So we're going to bring in this identity layer with the phone number, with the SIM, back into the internet. Essentially, to your point, it's always been in there, but we're not kind of marrying traditional internet, Web 2.0, with this new Web 3.0. With the Web 3.0, with the mobile networks. Theodore, can you talk a little bit more on how Fox Solutions is approaching solving some of these issues for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I believe it's very important to the ecosystem at large, and it's a great question. For some time, right, for a long time actually, A2P SMS has been the backbone of the verification process virtually. But I think it's worth taking a step back and basically just asking ourselves, what do users want out of verification process, right? Identity. It's generally safety foremost and customer experience, right? Now, what do enterprises want? Basically the same, but they also care about cost. In order to have anything that is viable in terms of technology, you must have trust. And the problem is, I believe, with SMS at this point in time, that we are in I wouldn't call it an inflection point, but there are issues currently in the industry that are causing SMS to lose trust as a channel. So at Vox, I'm really not seeing this going in the right direction. As we know, SMS rates are increasing in different markets, right? And that's generally not a problem as long as you deliver the safety and you deliver the customer experience with the growing cost of a certain service, right? So that's why I call it unsustainable, because that's not happening. At Vox, we basically provide technology to stop fraud within the SMS space and also provide mobile identity solutions to enterprises. And by working with operators globally, we're basically seeing increased fraud levels in many regions, right? Either spam, artificial traffic, SMS trashing. So we're seeing increased number of users before we come in projects, either not receiving OTP codes or receiving OTP codes they did not virtually ask for, right? So that's actually a big problem, because you don't want it to turn into a channel that takes, let's say, the trajectory of P2P voice, right? Even now, you can have voice calls on roaming, but people just use data because it has a better customer experience. You don't want that to happen with SMS. So the point is, I believe the main important thing to understand is that all parties must use technology in a responsible way and sustainable way, right? And maybe I'm a bit sorry for taking a bit longer to respond to this, but there's also, let's say, recently a more interesting discussion on this, which is flash calling. Flash calling is just virtually another technology in the mobile ecosystem that can be controlled by MNOs, but it is very important to see how that will evolve in terms of how do players in the market, apart from operators, use that in creating frictionless customer experience, which is actually viable with technology such as flash calling.
Okay. So we have this ability now to work with the carriers, improve identification of fraud over SMS, do flash calling, do verification. Andrew, I'm going to steal a little bit from Andrew Budd's conversation just a minute ago. He started raising this idea of mobile intelligence, which I think you were just referring to when you talked about the new APIs that were coming into play. And this is not just about carriers. I mean, Theodore just raised a really important point. It's about the ecosystem. So carriers are doing a bunch of work, providing capability that now retailers, banks, brands, pretty much anybody in the industry can partner with. It's kind of, who wants to explain what mobile intelligence is and how the other side of the industry, the banks, the retailers, can leverage this capability? Which one do you want to pick that up?
I can start.
Okay, go for it.
First of all, maybe we need to identify the value of it. It's an ecosystem, no doubt, right? So we talked about biometrics earlier as well. So for example, to identify a person, a natural person with enough confidence from fingerprint, you need 12 data points. And that's been there since 1930, right? We still use at least 12 data points and more. There's an MIT paper, it's called Unique in the Crowd. You can Google it. It says, and again, it's not from the mobile operators, it's from MIT. It says that to have 95% confidence on a natural person's identity, you need 4 mobile data points, any randomly selected 4 data points. And for 50% confidence, you only need 2 data points. And we have identified 65 data points in the identity space, which are available right now in each of the 712 mobile operators around the world. So that highlights the value alongside any other kind of data elements that exists in there in the mobile intelligence space.
Okay, so mobile operators have 65, 66 data points that they can leverage that are accessed through the APIs that you were just bringing up. And how does a business use that, leverage it? Who do they work with? Who else in the ecosystem can help us, help them help their customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I'd love to get my hands on all 60, by the way, Gautam. I mean, I think we've got about...
I already asked him for the list.
I think we've got about 10 or 20 so far, and I think the thing I would say about what we have today and what we're standardizing, it's all kind of, we are a first-party data business, right? Which is quite rare these days, actually, because a lot of the kind of data brokers are kind of just playing with data and mixing it around and doing stuff with it. So we're a first-party data provider, and
when we say we, just be clear, carriers.
I mean carriers.
Mobile operators.
So yeah,
okay.
Mobile operators, carriers, first-party data provider, and we're offering kind of risk signals, I guess. So data from the network that is deterministic, generally speaking. We could do probabilistic stuff. We're generally not doing that today on a large scale, and most of the APIs that were announced today are deterministic data. And I guess I'll give you one example.
But before we move on, so I'm a bank. Someone's conducting a transaction at one of my ATMs. I know their phone number, tied with their account. What are they doing? They basically take the phone number they know about me, because they have first-party data too, pass it over to either one of their aggregation partners or directly to the relationship they have with the bank or with the carrier, And so you look at that phone number and do what with it?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a real example of something that is live in the UK market right now with all 4 mobile operators, which is a product we call Scam Signal. So you might be familiar with, large-scale social engineering that's happening in the UK, and maybe it's been talked about today, which is APP fraud, whereby, victims are getting socially engineered over the phone, sometimes for calls of 60 minutes or more. And of course, the bank, the kind of point of that fraud is it is authorized fraud. So the victim is being coached to log into their bank account, authenticate themselves, set up a new payment beneficiary, transfer the money to this safe account, all over the period of sort of 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. And the bank finds it quite hard to detect whether it's, fraud or not, right? So we've got a new service from the UK operators, which is being rolled out in other markets right now, which lets the bank, with a relevant lawful basis, which is legitimate interest in this case, for this use case and this service, call the API from the operator and ask, is this customer on a phone call, true or false? What's the duration of this phone call in minutes or seconds? And the direction, is it a call to the recipient or the consumer, or is it from the consumer to the bank? And it's amazing how successful that's been in reducing this type of APP fraud, even in the last few months since we've had it live. Just by adding that to, the bank will have some data, of course, and they've got their risk platforms, and they can do some kind of logic there and risk decisioning. But actually adding this extra data point in from the Scam Signal service we're offering is really, I think, quite game-changing, and has been really taking out a lot of the fraud for the banks that have deployed it.
And to go back to humanizing this a little bit too, it's not just about fraud and criminals, et cetera, as well. It's also brands wanting to do the right thing. So, for example, especially in the UK, because there's just a tremendous amount of regulation and development happening in this area, age verification. And so the UK carriers and many other carriers around the world are opening up APIs for age checks as well, because that way parents can buy their phone, they can then say this device is now associated with a minor, and then that device now can signal the fact that, okay, this device is a minor, and so then any brand or property working through that phone number can know to treat the content they deliver to that device appropriately. So there's so much that gets wrapped up into this phone number, and so you've got a lot of history and ideas about a phone number, Noah. You want to talk to us about that, and where is this all going? How do we actually start implementing these APIs, technology, bring it together, tie it together with IoT, et cetera?
Well, I think it's very interesting because coming from telecom, we touch everything, right? So whether it's a SIM card, whether it's a mobile operator, whether it's an OTT app that resides on top of your service where it's still using the telecommunications network, I think all of those are invaluable, including the IoT. You mentioned IoT. IoT is growing at an exponential rate. All of our usable items around us are becoming IoT underneath the surface, and we don't even know it. But how are they powered? They're powered by our telecommunications networks. So if you take all of these and you look at the lowest common denominator, telecommunications industry touches all of us in so many different ways. So using it, and this is why I mentioned that in the earlier discussion, is consensus doesn't necessarily have to be a face or a phone call. It can be a randomized by level transaction hidden within the same transaction. So maybe it takes 6 steps to do one single transaction, each of which can be pinged off of a different identity platform, whether it's an OTT application that allows you to call, which we've been a part of, some of the integrations where you have an app on the phone, it sends a signal on the back end underneath, lets a call center know, hey, this person needs a call. The call center presents a number, it's popped up into an application, so now that's a verified caller. You know that the brand is actually calling you at that point. So there's so many different layers.
So what we're saying is not just about businesses being able to know your customer. Now the customer can know the business.
Oh yeah.
So this is like know the entity. So so I now can know and verify that this is actually, I'm dealing with Amazon, so therefore I want to give them my credit card because I trust them.
And there's even KYB.
Yeah, so KYB, know your business.
KYB is know your business. And there's something we've been investigating because, again, telecom already has this huge structure of chain of custody. So we are talking about KYCCC, know your customer's customer's customer. And that's very important, but you as a consumer just definitely don't want to deal with the friction. You just want to do a single transaction in lightning fast speed. It's our job in the industry to make it as invisible and secure as possible.
Okay. So we only have about 4 minutes left, and I do want to open this up to a couple questions. So let's start with, as we're kind of rounding this up, this idea of this panel was about humanizing the mobile ecosystem and ensuring that the experience is delightful, but yet secure. So Theodore, a couple last remarks. As people walk out of the room today, what do you want them to know and do? What's the first thing they need to do tomorrow when, based on what they've learned from us today?
So I think for me, it's very important for everyone to understand the channels that they're basically using in any sort of process that is related to verification. This is one thing. I think on the other side, regarding all players involved, the key takeaway for me is technology will constantly evolve, right? There will always be technology that helps transactions and interactions be more secure, and also technology that causes fraud. People always try to use it and leverage that. It is the responsibility of the ecosystem, as is rightfully mentioned, to basically put that at play. As we've also said, mobile operators are at the forefront, right, of most of these processes, or involved within them, or it's part of the ecosystem at large. So I think the key takeaway is just use the right technology in order to keep everyone safe.
All right. And each one of you, same question. Like, what do they need to do tomorrow? Go back to their boss, or if they are the boss, what do they need to resource so that they can actually make this happen?
I'll come back to the humanization thing. So, the world in the identity space is moving towards cryptographic authentication. We heard about FIDO2 earlier, decentralized identity. The Web 2, Web 5, they all use cryptographic authentication. Now, passkeys as well, using cryptographic authentication. But I don't know if you have ever seen the cryptographic key, for example, the ECDSA key. It's ugly. It's impossible for anyone to remember, don't need to. But then what happens is, because it's ugly, it's not humanized, no human can actually process it. All the problems start from there, right? Because we expect that the user manages it, stores it, maybe remembers it, or secures it. That doesn't happen. And that's where all the security leakage in identity space is happening. But I just want all of us to remember that from 1991, the SIM has been doing cryptographic processing and storing the key without any of us even knowing it. It's humanized. So mobile authentication is there. We all should use it.
Okay. Neil?
Yeah, so I think, Michael, what I just want to add is that I'm completely in game for the trusted mobile number effect. I think
Hold up your mic.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm saying that the trusted mobile number effect is what we're talking about. But what we add to this is the trusted device effect as well. So I think almost the same amount of parameters, close to 60 parameters that we can read about the device, which is again the non-PII data, and that makes the whole process to be much more robust.
Okay. No?
Well, I'm going to come back to my favorite thing ever, a phone number. And I'm only going to say that because I'm thinking about the consumer view. We haven't had the need for phone numbers for a decade, but yet consumer behavior drives everything in our world. Just follow the consumer and build around the consumer's already acceptable policies, because that's the least friction and that's the most humanized approach.
I think as a kind of parting shot, I would say, we as telecoms, we've dipped our toe a little bit in the identity space, and I think we've proven we can be successful with some very well-targeted services like SIM-swap API or the seamless authentication API, which lets you do number verification seamlessly through the network. And it's given us the confidence to actually, go out there with the announcement we did this morning and actually roll out these things at scale and build in many, many more risk signals. Gautam talked about 60, whether we'll get 60, I don't know, but when we can address scale use cases across the globe and reach 6 billion people through the operators, that's when we know we're going to be successful.
So what I'm taking away from hearing all of you is we can have a humanized, easy to use, secure digital experience. The solution's there, the technology's there, the partnerships are there. Larger brands can reach out to the carriers directly. Smaller ones can go through their aggregation partners and or find technology solution providers like Vox and the rest of you, and they can make it happen. So there's like Cinch and Telesign. It's one of the leaders in the MMA, or excuse me, I keep saying that with the MEF, that can help that happen. So thank you very much. Any final questions from anybody before we move on to the next panel? Questions about mobile intelligence, decentralized identity, phone number being the central role of the market? I got one right back there.
I guess, what do you see ultimately as the biggest threat that no one's essentially talking about, which is the fact that, a decentralized blockchain can't be mutated, meaning it can have a historical look back. So it might have a super long encryption key, but, look how fast computing power is just exponentially growing. It would be able to get, solved quickly. Do you see that as a problem at all? And how do you think we could possibly hedge against that?
You're our blockchain expert, so go for it. Noah?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to say anything, but I hold several patents in blockchain and telecommunications, and I'm a heavy believer in decentralization. And I think that stakeholder value incorporates a trust that we all have to maintain in our space. And inevitably, when you think about blockchain, it does have these very long keys, that are encrypted, but it's our job to make them hidden and invisible to the consumer, but still use this underlying technology. I think it's a brilliant.
Well, and,
Do you-
and to the point we brought up, they can be proxy to the SIM or proxy to the phone number. There's a lot of different ways to leverage those keys, or to the Face ID from what Andrew was talking about. So there's a lot of ways we can make it easier for the consumer, but also leverage the technology.
It's going to take a community.
Yeah.
It's going to take this community and more outside of telecom, for sure.
Do you feel
Gentlemen.
a human or a consumer or what a person on the DID should own their own identity graph?
I heavily believe that we have to take control.
Yeah, and let's have that offline, though, because we got to pop to the next session. So thank you very much, everybody. And Theodore, talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. So next up, we're going to switch our slides, and we'll get started from that. I am